area are you from? Maria's from 8. Thank you, Maria, and that's East Texas. We have Krista from 8 also. No, you're 9. Thank you, Krista. You're from West Central Texas. And Robin is from the Gulf Coast. Well, thank you so much for participating. And so we have a wide variety of participants in the presentation this afternoon. So we're going to jump right in. Our learning objectives: by the end of this webinar, you will have some key interviewing tools that are necessary for your students to have a successful interview. Throughout the webinar, we will provide activities that could easily be transferred to the classroom. So let's get started. Our objectives today is one, is that by the end of this webinar, your students will be able to identify ways to prepare for an interview, will understand and distinguish between types and methods of interviewing used by employers, and be able to recognize key interview questions. So let me ask you, how long do you think it takes to form a first impression for someone? Use your chat box to respond to that answer. I'll give you just a couple of seconds to respond. To how long do you think it takes to form a first impression of someone? Less than a minute, Robin. Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? Maria says 5 seconds. Well, thank you, Maria and Robin. Actually, according to a recent article written for LinkedIn in 2016, it takes an average of 7 seconds to form a first impression. However, keep in mind that the rule is not set to 7 seconds. There are several research studies that indicate that the length of time can vary anywhere from 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or 5. One thing that's very consistent is that there is a moment within their first few seconds that a person that's being interviewed forms their very first impression. Do you know that in a job interview, answering all the questions right is actually only half of the story? Most candidates would be surprised to learn how much nonverbal cues, such as body language, facial expression, eye contact, really matter in forming the very first impression. Nonverbal cues are your handshake, eye contact, body language, your posture, and facial expression. Even before the interview begins, employers are already discerning and making perceptions based on the interviewee's nonverbal cues. Another important nonverbal cue that is not listed but that is equally important is punctuality. Life happens, and if you live anywhere in Texas, you know traffic happens as well. But if you find yourself running late for an interview, call as soon as possible to let the interviewer know. They'll appreciate it much more than if you come into the interview with a lame excuse after they've already waited for you 30 minutes. You've heard it a million times. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. Please, it's very important, stress at all points to your students that punctuality for a job interview is non-negotiable, is an absolute must. Now let's look at some of those nonverbal cues, but before we do, I'd like to play a little game with you, and it's called What's Wrong with This Picture? Can you identify in this picture nonverbal cues in this picture? I'll give you a few seconds to record your answer in the chat box. What are some nonverbal cues that you see in this picture? I can think of about 4 offhand. Leaning in too much, her raised eyebrows, hand on the knee, very good. Talk about invading personal space. Her eyes raised, facial expression, smiling. Very good. Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Robin and Marie. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Straight back. All of these are nonverbal cues. Sitting too close In general, yes, that's an invasion of personal space. All of these are absolutely right. Thank you so much for participating in that. A next nonverbal cue that is equally important is the handshake. This is your first encounter with the interviewer. If the interviewer holds out his or her hands and receive a limp, damp hand in return, this is not a very good beginning. This is called a limp fish handshake, which is too soft and could easily signify insecurity, while a handshake that is too hard could project arrogance. So what's the right type of handshake? A handshake lasting way too long also tells a hiring manager that you might be trying overly hard to impress them and that you might stretch the truth about your accomplishment. Would it be interesting for you to know that 21% of interviewers will reject a candidate who gives a weak handshake? And that's according to a study conducted by CareerBuilder's staffing agency. So handshake really does carry a lot of weight during the interview. Your handshake, how should it be? Your handshake should be firm. A firm handshake is always a winner and could be the difference in landing a job or not. It's important to get it right. Now I have another little what's wrong with this picture activity. Please take a couple of seconds and review the picture and respond using your chat box to record your answer. Just give me a few nonverbal cues that you see in this picture. Good. Looking down, no icon, hand claps, fidgeting, seems uninterested and maybe unsure. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, and you're all absolutely right. Seems uninterested, or even bored for that matter. You're absolutely right. Thank you. Another interesting study indicates that 39% of interviewers are put off from candidates that do not smile or fail to smile in an interview. I found these statistics very interesting and just really go along to solidify how important non-verbal cues are during an interview. Now, what about eye contact? Poor eye contact can signify that you are not interested in the position. Avoid constantly looking around the room while talking because this can convey nervousness or a lack of confidence. On the other hand, you don't want to stare at an interviewer like you're looking into his or her soul. Use reasonable contact to show interest and an opportunity to connect with the interviewer. Another interesting fact, 67% of hiring managers cited lack of eye contact as the biggest mistake candidates make during the interview. 67% of hiring managers. That's a pretty substantial citing there. Now, while we've talked about the handshake, we've talked about eye contact, we also talked about being confident. You want to be confident. You want your student to be confident, but you don't want them to be too confident. Being overly confident could really cause the interviewer to become uncomfortable. So they don't want to be too familiar during the interview process. Now I have another what's wrong with this picture. Take a few seconds to see if you can spot the inappropriate nonverbal cues during this interview. Please use your chat box to record your answers. Texting posture, very good. On the phone, phoning a friend, laugh out loud. On the phone, checking his phone, slouching. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Krista, Kelly, Robin, knee on the desk. While these are all really great pictures, these are actually not uncommon occurrences during an interview. It's very, very important that in the process, as you are conveying this information to your students, that you let your students know, while having a good resume is good, filling out an application need is good, but having that interview and those nonverbal cues weigh just as much weight as the actual interview itself. So thank you so much, and keep in mind that these nonverbal cues, that they're important during the interview process. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague David, and he is going to go a little bit more in depth about the first impression and how can we prepare to make sure we make a good first impression.
All right, thank you, Talisa. Okay, now, I'm going to try to make a good first impression, but I suppose my 7 seconds are up by now. But you know what? Making a good first impression is only the beginning. Sorry, I needed to flip forward on the presentation. Making a good first impression is only the beginning. We want to talk to you about ways to prepare for an interview. First, we're going to cover 5 key steps to effectively prepare for an interview, and then we're going to go a little deeper into presenting ourselves in front of an employer. First, I want to note that these 5 key steps are interrelated, so they feed off of one another. Hence, the graphic that I have there depicts a circle or a cycle. Now, the first key step is knowing your target. Knowing your target is the same as knowing the employer, because that's your ultimate target that you're going to be speaking with. Now, Talisa touched on this a moment ago. We really want to know the employer and all about that employer. Otherwise, there might be other consequences that we may have to face up to if we don't. So knowing the employer also gives us an opportunity to discuss our strengths and skills and how we can use them for the employer. So one activity that I want to do real quick, using your keyboard, go ahead and put it in the chat. I want to know what are some ways that we can get to know an employer? What are some ways that you use to get to know an employer? Go ahead and enter your chat there. Chat to everyone. We can do internet search. Okay, that's a good example. Online web search. Yep, that's a good example too. Thanks, Marie. What about on the internet? Maybe the Chamber of Commerce we could look up and find out information about that employer. We could look at the employer website itself in the About section of their website. So these are all good ways that we can get to know an employer. We could also check out the job and name the description of what they do. Yep, that's good too. We could also maybe friends and contacts we know that used to work for that employer, right? Speak to somebody who works there. Good, Robin, thank you. So these are all ways that we can get to know an employer. Now, speaking of the target, did you know that there's another target that we should know about? And that's you. In order to express our confidence, we need to know ourselves and how we can relate to that employer. Going a little bit further, just like Uncle Sam there and the other employers who are interested in talking to you, we want to be ourselves. So be yourself. Now that may sound rather cliche, but I know for myself, whenever I'm not myself, people can generally tell right away that I'm not being myself, because I don't have confidence if I'm trying to be someone I'm not. And also, sometimes it's pretty obvious. But at the same time, I don't want to go too far. Like when I'm around friends, I may say this may be me when I'm around friends, but certainly not during an interview. So the next key step is to prepare and practice. I know right now we are in the process of preparing and practice, but that can't be overstated enough. Have you ever heard that saying that practice makes perfect? Well, I have. On a personal level, you can probably attest to that, and I know I can. Practice may not lead to perfection, but it does make me better. Just like anything, the more we do something, the better we get. Once we become comfortable with these steps, there are ways that we can practice. Like, for instance, in front of a mirror, that's one way. In front of another friend or a family member, in front of a video recorder. Most of our phones that we have video recordings, so we can take a video of ourselves, or even just talking to yourself, and just like, in front of a mirror, same thing, but talking to yourself, sometimes going over your notes, that's always a help. I call it the 3 Ps: practice, practice, practice. Next, another 5 key step is making a good first impression. Now, we've already discussed making a first impression. Ms. Felisa covered that pretty good. It's always good to make a good first impression, but an overall good first impression extends beyond the first impression. You'd be surprised how many employers are looking for those soft skills, attire, manners, confidence, just as much as they are hard skills, welding, accounting. Those are just examples. And speaking of attire, I don't mean that attire, I mean that attire. Of course, it's a difference between work attire and interview attire. For example, would it be proper, go ahead and look, enter on your chat box, if I were hiring for a job as a nurse at a hospital, would it be proper to wear scrubs to the interview? No, that's correct, it would not be. I would probably wear something more at a job interview than scrubs. That's what I wear on an everyday basis at the hospital. On the other hand, if I were applying as a machinist for a plant, would I wear a three-piece suit? Go ahead and enter your answer in the chat box. No, that's probably correct because I probably would not wear a three-piece suit at a job as a plant as a machinist. And I don't wear a three-piece suit in the work that I wear. Yes, I would look out of place. You're exactly right. I don't wear a three-piece suit where I work because it does not call for that. It calls for business casual, meaning nice pants, shirt, etc. Now, there's some differences between business casual versus professional, and this image kind of ties it all together. Overall, a good rule of thumb is to wear clothing that is a step above what they normally wear at that place of business for the job that you're applying for. So, for instance, would you wear a suit and tie for a cashier position at a fast food restaurant? Probably not. At the same time, I wouldn't wear a t-shirt either. I would advise against that. We just always want to go a step above. So in general, I think this image speaks of wearing conservative style, maybe not bright red colors, but maybe a maroon color. We think about reducing the amount of jewelry that we wear, maybe not going overboard on cologne or perfume. Some people may have allergies we need to think about. Trousers, nice slacks or trousers like Dockers. I would not suggest wearing blue jeans, even though some people may wear blue jeans at the place of business. At an interview, we want to go a step above. So I would suggest wearing nice pants. Okay? Men, shave in the morning, right? Ladies, high heels, maybe not be the best thing. Maybe keep it low. So those are just some examples, but it overall speaks conservative dress. Next, the next step informs us to ask questions. And you may be thinking, asking questions, why do I want to ask questions? I thought that's what the employer does. Well, that's true, and they will. And Diego's going to cover that in a little bit. But I think the person being interviewed asking questions in a lot of cases will set that person apart from the other job candidates. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And what questions you may be wondering, well, that's where step one, knowing your target, can be beneficial. And so knowing your target, the employer, gives you information about the company as well as the position. And from that, you can develop questions that go a little deeper than the superficial type, like, when will you be making a decision? There's nothing wrong with that question. It's a good question. It's a little simple question. There's a simple answer and a straight answer, like, for instance, next week or within 2 weeks. But if I know my target and I've developed certain questions, I might can go a little deeper with the question like, I see your organization helps sponsor Toys for Tots each year. Are employees encouraged to participate in that as well? You see how that question goes a little deeper. It is a little more complex. It opens up conversation. It lets the employer know that you may be interested in helping others or giving to others. And you want to know how I can do that. Is that a part of the position? So those are just a couple of examples of asking questions that go a little bit deeper. That lets the employer know that you did a little research. Okay. Now, of course, there are some questions that we should not ask. So anything related to salary or benefits will come into play after an offer has been made. It's wise to research the position so you're prepared for negotiation, just not right now, not during the interview. Besides, the employer may get the opinion that you're all about money and not the job itself. Asking about drug or background policy might tell the employer that you have something to hide. It's not your business to know how a previous candidate or a person you're replacing handled the job. And the worst question is the one that you never ask. It shows lack of interest or preparation. So always be prepared to come up with a few questions to ask. Next on our cycle is, sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. Next on the cycle is to finally go through follow-up. Now, this could also be a difference maker. Remember that also, if you say you're going to follow up, then definitely follow up. A good idea is to take notes during the interview to help you generate information that you would include in your follow-up communication. Always remember, though, that ask permission first before you start to take notes. That shows that you're polite and have manners. Another good idea is to directly, after the interview, take a little bit of time in a quiet place and think about the interview. How did it go? Was there something that you forgot to mention? Did you learn something personal about the person who is interviewing you? Like, for instance, a favorite baseball team or favorite music or movie, perhaps? That's one way that you can make a personal connection between the two of you, and you can include that in your follow-up communication. So anyway, that will help you. And these are all just 5 key steps to effectively prepare for an interview. Next, we're going to have an activity that you can use for your students to help you prepare for an interview. And you're probably wondering why a car is on the screen. Well, during the interview, the employer is looking for you to tell them not only about your success, but how you got there. We want to develop a way that can express to the employer just that. Now, it doesn't mean that we drove a car to get there, but we used a car, a challenge, action, and result. This hopefully is a simple method to briefly tell a story that summarizes your accomplishment that you made overcoming a challenge and what actions you took to get there. There are great ways to answer behavioral type questions. Belta is going to go into that a little bit more in a moment, but I can tell you that behavioral type questions generally begin with tell me about a time when, or give me an example of. In answering that, we would describe a challenge that we were faced with that needed to be resolved. What was that challenge? We're also going to go into what actions that we took to make sure that challenge was resolved, and then what were the results of the actions that we took to meet that challenge. So let's take a look at a few examples of CAR statements. I'm going to present with you with a statement, and I'm going to pull out certain portions of that statement, and I want you to identify, is this a challenge, is this the action, or is this the result, okay? Okay, so this is the first question, or this is the statement that we're using, or first question. I identified and launched customer questionnaire survey at City Auto Service, resulting in a collection of 2,000 results, leading to improved customer satisfaction by 98%. That is the statement that we're using. And I'm pulling out certain portions of that. I want you to use your chat box, and you tell me, please, that statement that I pulled out, improved customer satisfaction. Was that a challenge, or was it an action, or was it a result? That is, improve customer satisfaction. I'm looking to improve customer satisfaction. Go ahead and look, you can use C for challenge, A for action, and R for result. Result, okay, okay. To improve customer satisfaction, result, okay. Actually, it's a challenge, okay? We're going to find out in a minute why. But right now, our challenge is to improve customer satisfaction, okay? Next, we collected 2,000 survey results. Is that a C? Well, we already got challenge. Is that an action or is that a result? A for action, R for result. Good, Marie. Action. Thank you. Action. You're right. It's the collection of 2,000 survey results. So we had a challenge. We wanted to improve customer satisfaction. We took an action. We collected 2,000 survey results. And of course, the results were 98% customer satisfaction. Generally, you want to include results by including numbers, percentage-wise, dollar increase, amount of time that we reduce to take care of this or that task, etc. Okay? So we got a little bit of an example of one. Let's go to another one. We reviewed 4,000 preventative maintenance procedures for computer chips and eliminated 1,000 extraneous procedures, reducing the cost of transfer data by nearly 10,000. Okay? Now, the first one we said reviewed or eliminated procedures. Is that a challenge? C, action, A, or result, R? I see some action, right? Very good. It's an action. We reviewed and eliminated procedures. The next one, to reduce cost of transferring data. Was that the challenge that we were looking for, or was that the result? That was the challenge. You're right, Marie. That was the challenge we were looking to do, to reduce cost of transferring data. And of course, reduce the cost by nearly $10,000. That's the result. So we're taking all these statements and we're introducing, sometimes the challenge may not come in that same order, challenge, action, result. It may have action, challenge, and then result. It's just the way we word it. But basically, overall, we're taking a challenge, we're introducing actions to meet that challenge, and then what were the results? And then usually we're surrounding that with numbers, percentages, dollar signs, and stuff like that. So whatever car or vehicle you use, hauling around these 5 key points will help you get to where you want to be. Okay? And next up, we're going to give the microphone over to Velta, and she's going to cover some different types of interviews. Okay? So Velta, are you there?
I am. Thank you, David. So here's an interesting slide. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm coming from a different location. So these individuals look really, really excited about interviewing, don't they? I know we've had several discussions on body language, first impressions, and definitely if I was the admin person looking at all my people that are coming in for an interview, I would be a little bit concerned. So that's why it's really important to prepare for interviews, from beginning to end. So we're now going to look at several different types of interviews because some employers may use a variety of techniques in search of the best job candidate. But keep in mind, your students might not have many of the interview types we discuss. But as they go into the future, as they get their diploma, as they work towards certificate programs or whatever it is they're working towards, we would want them to recognize that they could encounter a variety of interview methods, and so we'd like to prepare them. Next slide, please. So the first type of interview I'd like to talk about are screening or phone interviews. Phone interviews are cost-effective. because the employer doesn't have to set up, has to go anywhere, or it doesn't take a lot of time. Just pick up the phone, dial a number. Some staffing agencies may use this technique, and it's really used to screen people out before they're brought in person. Keep in mind, an employer may call a job seeker without an appointment. They may just up and call them. I've actually had that happen to me several times. One time I was in my car, and another time I was riding my bike. So it can happen at any time. But for the most part, most employers will try to schedule an appointment for the phone interview. What's really great about the phone interview is it's like an open book exam. So you can, a job seeker can have all their materials in front of them, their research about the company, a copy of their resume, questions to ask, if that's needed, maybe some notes, and they can be taking notes. Next slide, please. So because the interviewer can't see the body language, though, on the phone, it's really important to answer questions in a positive way, with energy. So some helpful hints for a phone interview. First of all, if you're in the car, pull over. If you're on the bike and you're next to a lot of traffic, it might be a good idea to ask, could I call you right back so I can get into a safe place? If you're at home or in, Starbucks or something, you might want to go to a quieter location, a room where you can shut the door. Smartphones can pick up a lot of background noise, including TVs and radios. And then if, children, pets, you might want to move them or have you move to another part of the house. So the next type of interview is probably the most common that we're familiar with. It's often called a personal interview or in-person interview. It's typically one-on-one at the company's office. These interviews can last, from 30 minutes to 90 minutes. It just depends on the question. This provides an initial first impression of your attitude, interest, and professional style. This type of interview may not always be with the final decision maker. They may, in fact, call people in to come in for a second interview with other people. But a job seeker will still need to sell him or herself, even if it's not the actual decision maker, because they're the ones that are going to pass that individual on for the next interview. So you'll want to prepare for this type of interview like Lisa and David talked about earlier, making that first impression, dressing appropriately, being aware of your body language, having several car statements ready to go, and by practicing typical interview questions. And Diego's going to talk about some of those questions in a few minutes. So the next one is behavioral-based interviews. They probe much deeper and may start with things like, and I think David mentioned this, tell me about a time when, or give me an example of. This type of interview provides more information about your behavior, your personality, your character, and the soft skills that many employers are looking for. So a job seeker should prepare by thinking of specific examples that can demonstrate competence in core behaviors such as teamwork, problem solving, communication, creativity, flexibility, and organizational skills. These types of interviews, though, can actually happen in any number of, they can bring in the behavioral-based questions in any interview, whether it's on the phone or in person. So sometimes it's not always separated out. So that car statement or several car statements are going to be really, really important. Tell me about a time when you had a conflict on the job and how did you handle it? A car statement would be really great for that. So, and keep in mind that, once again, that these types of questions can be asked in any type of interview. So the next type of interview is known as a group or panel interview. It can be a group of people, a group of job seekers all together, or it can be the job seeker with 2 or 3 or more people for the interview. I've actually had where I had 25 people on a panel in an interview before. That might not be that's probably not very typical, but you know, it just depends on the company and what they're looking for. Now, some of the jobs, and one of them that actually I heard about recently, Amazon is opening up a large facility near us. I just heard this on the news this past week, and they talked about that they're going to be doing group interviews. They're just going to bring a bunch of people in, they're going to interview them all together, and they're going to offer jobs on the spot. So that's kind of how a group interview works. I've seen those work really well. You'll see those in retail, food service, maybe the transportation industry. I've seen that like with UPS, FedEx, they'll do that. So employers are known to interview groups. It's really an efficient way to interview, you know, when you have lots of hires and you need to get people in quickly. And it also, when you have the panel, when you have more than one interviewer, it can give different interpretations or perception of the same answer that's asked. So some of the tips for this type of interview are try to maintain eye contact with all group members, whether it's the person asking questions or the other interviewers who are there, and maybe even some of the other individuals that are in your group. You want to establish rapport with everybody that's in the group as you're interviewing. If other job seekers are present, you might want to introduce yourself to them and acknowledge them as well, and then build upon some of their answers. That's a really good way to handle that group type interview. So the next one, we're probably pretty familiar, but we don't think of it as an interview, but really it kind of is. It's really to screen people out, task-oriented or testing. And as you can see, there's a keyboard. I know I've had to do that, where I'd had to, you know, the typing test. There may be other types of jobs, such as welding. Maybe they want you to demonstrate a weld on some certain piece of pipe, you know, some type of specific skill requirement. So, and it is a way to screen people out. I actually had a testing interview that was done online for a hospital, and they were asking questions such as to find out how you feel about honesty. There were behavioral-based multiple choice type questions, so they were really trying to get at how honest are you, what would you do if you saw someone doing something unethical on the job, you know, those types of things. And so I like some of the comments I see. Many years ago, I attended a group interview with American Airlines. Absolutely. And then employment agencies use testing to measure your skills. It's also a screening tool to screen people out, unfortunately. So let's go to the next one. The next one I have never had. Maybe some of you have had. I know one of my coworkers mentions that he has had this. But it's kind of like Skype, FaceTime, you know, video chat, those types of things. These are actually just like the in-person interview, the phone interview, behavioral interview, all of that. So definitely you're going to want to be dressed and, you know, remember those first impressions. It can be very convenient, especially if it's an overseas situation. They don't want to, you know, not that our clients are going to be interviewing, you know, for a company in Europe, but it could be locally that it's just easier to do it that way. So some tips for this type of interview include, you know, you've got to be prepared just like all the other interviews. I really think for any interview, but this one in particular, that you practice in front of a video camera or a mirror. Maybe get someone to use your phone and do kind of an interview, or do a FaceTime with someone. Mock interviews. All of that is really good for any type of interview. And activity and an activity you could do with your students is to conduct some mock interviews that are recorded with a video camera. I know we, as the regional team, we sometimes participate in those types of activities where we do mock interviews and we actually record the person. Then we can give them the thumb drive with their recording, and they can use that as feedback for themselves on how they did. And it really shows a lot, like how comfortable they appear. They may not realize they have, you know, a nervous twitch. It gives a good view of the body language, and it really can help make them comfortable with interviewing. So I'd like to talk about some of the interview types that we've already discussed, just to do a little activity. So I'm going to go through the slides, and then you're just going to put up, you know, the letter of what you think is the best answer. So in a demonstration type of interview, which one would be the best answer? A, screening or phone interview. B, individual interview. C, behavioral-based interview. Or D, task-oriented or testing interview. Which one is usually the one where we do a demonstration? Very good. Next slide. There you go. Yes, it is D. Occasionally you could have it while you're there. You know, sometimes employers will do that. But anyway, next one is types of interviews that would say, tell me about a time. Which one would fit this one? And I'm not going to read through them individually. You can do that. So we have a C. Yeah, we have several that have said C. Next slide, please. Absolutely, that's the behavioral-based interview. But remember, those questions, those behavioral-based questions, could be asked in any type of interview. Some employers like to have a specific interview where the questions are completely behavioral-based. Next one, please. 3 or more. Which one do you think would be the right response? Yes, A, the group or panel interview. And then the last one is open book interview. Which one falls under that classification, that it's like an open book interview? Yes, screening or phone interview. But I will say maybe in a video conference, since you're only seeing, you know, from basically chest up, maybe waist up, that could kind of be an open book, because you could have all your paperwork and documents there available to look at, you know, if you needed to. Next slide. So, as the interview types are mastered, and not all of us have had all of these different types of interviews, but some may and some will in the future. Hopefully your students will go to interviews fully prepared, and really the goal is to leave with a job offer. So that's really the ultimate goal. So I'm now going to turn the microphone over to Diego, who will be talking to us about how to answer key interview questions.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I know the picture shows that we're going to party, but we're not going to party for the next 10 minutes. I'm going to talk about types of interview questions and how to answer them. But thank you very much, Velsa. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a human service professional with 4 years of experience in workforce development and hold a bachelor's degree in business administration. I facilitate and develop trainings in the form of job search seminars, overviews of my organization's services, and statewide webinars to adult education and literacy professionals. I am recognized as a subject matter and workforce board expert for workforce solutions. I am always looking to build relationships with potential partners. Today, I'm going to talk about the types of questions you will encounter on an interview and how to answer them. So let's begin. First, let's just take a quick look about the most common interviewing questions according to Monster.com. Here are a list of the top 10 questions. If you have ever been interviewed, you've probably been asked some of these questions, if not all of them. If we look at number 1, the most common interview question is, what can you tell me about yourself? The answer lies within the 30-second commercial. What's a 30-second commercial? It is also known as an elevator pitch. It is a way to package your skills, experience, education, and other accomplishments in a succinct way that will help set a positive tone for your interview. I opened my portion of this presentation with my 30-second commercial because not only does it answer the most common interview question, but it is also a great way to network when meeting a new person or audience. What I like about a well-constructed 30-second commercial is that if you remove the personal pronouns, it's a good summary section for your resume. We briefly saw the most common interview questions like, what are your greatest strengths and weaknesses? And why should I hire you? But employers now get a feel of how their potential employees will behave in certain situations by asking behavioral questions. David and Velta touched on these earlier in the presentation. These questions will give hiring managers and or recruiters insight on the interviewee's behavior in areas such as teamwork, customer service, adaptability, time management, and communication. In the upcoming slides, we will review some behavioral questions and effective answers for them. Now, what I'm going to do is give you a moment to read a behavioral interview question and 3 candidates' answers. Once you have read the question and answer choices, enter the correct choice into the chat box. After, I will review why the right answer is right and the wrong answer is wrong. All right, now let's get started with the first question. What can you tell me about yourself? So we have 3 candidates' answers, A, B, and C. I will give you a small moment to read over these answers, and what I would like you to do is enter the correct answer choices letter into the chat box. What do you guys think, or what do you ladies and gentlemen think? B, B. So you ladies are right. The answer is B. So candidate A seems a little arrogant, so it's not really a good idea to answer a question with a question. And candidate C, they're a little too personal with their answer. Usually employers want to hear a candidate who has answers related to the job or can sum up their skills and their experience. And Mr. Dean over here, he gave his 30-second commercial. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Give me an example of a time you faced a conflict while working on a team. How did you handle that? So again, I'm going to give you a moment to look over these answer choices, and I'd like you to enter the correct answer into the chat box. C, C, C. All right. And you ladies are correct. Candidate C gave the best answer because she told a story of how she saw the challenge of working with a new team member and how she used strong emotional intelligence resulting in better team production. Candidate A obviously gave a bad answer. No manager wants to be punched in the face, and it kind of foreshadows that this manager might need good health insurance if they chose this employee. And candidate B gave a car statement. However, a candidate who grills previous coworkers, employers, or organizations will be looked at as negative, and that is not the impression that you want to give on a potential employer. All right, let's move on to the next question. How do you go about prioritizing your customers' needs? Again, I'll give you a short moment to enter your answer. If you follow the rule of selecting the longest answer, then you are correct. Candidate A gave the best answer because she shares how she can use her adaptability and organizational skills to help a variety of customers. Candidate B is just wrong because his answer reflects inexperience and immaturity. Candidate C's answer just screams desperation. Now let's move on to the next question. Give me an example of a time when you were able to successfully persuade someone to see things your way at work. Go ahead and take this time to enter your response as what is the correct answer into the chat box. Deciding, Marie C, Robin C, you ladies are correct. Candidate C not only answered with a car statement, but she quantified how she added value to the hospital. Candidate A blatantly told this interview that he bribed his last employer, and candidate B basically said he is going to bring politics into the workplace. And we never advise candidates to do that into their new jobs. And that sums up that activity. So let's just look at this illustration really quick. So in this case, honesty isn't always the best policy, right? But I'm going to do a really quick recap of what we covered today. Felisa covered how nonverbal cues such as a firm handshake and good posture can impact an employer's first impression of you. David covered 5 key steps in preparation, such as knowing your target, preparing in practice, making a good first impression, asking questions, and following up, so you don't waste your or your potential employer's time on this big day. Velsa showed us that we're not in Kansas anymore now that one-on-one interviews are no longer the norm when trying to enter the workforce. And lastly, I shared the types of questions employers asked and reviewed right and wrong answers for them. Overall, there are several key points necessary to have a successful interview. Prepare for an interview is always important. Knowing your skills, abilities, and being able to discuss them during an interview is very, very important. First impressions and using nonverbal cues are very important as well. Lastly, what you want to do is make sure that you stand out above the rest. So now what we are going to do is open the floor for questions that you may have regarding interviewing and best practices.
We have about 3 minutes, so any questions, just type them in the chat pod and we'll be glad to respond.
Thank you, Olga. If you have any questions about interviewing, maybe you'd like to share an experience you've had or anything in general, any comments you may have, that would be. Thank you, Marie. I'm glad we answered all your questions. Oh, whoops. How do you handle when an interviewer asks illegal questions? Are you married, have children, pregnant, etc.? How would we deal with those types of questions?
You direct the interviewer back to your skills and abilities to do the job.
Right. If you didn't hear Felisa right then and there, she mentioned that if you can direct the employer back to your skills and abilities and your qualifications, that'd be a good way to steer them back in the direction of how you'd perform the job effectively. How do you respond to it?
Look at that for a specific example and nothing comes to mind. That's a good question. And that's where, when I talked about when you're preparing and thinking about the target and thinking about yourself and knowing about yourself and how your skills and abilities are related to that one particular position. So in that example, you may go through several examples of how you do something or whatever, so you're always prepared to answer a question, you know, or think about some of those. Don't be afraid to include numbers and percentage and time. Like, for instance, I save time completing a task. That's very general, very on the surface, but it doesn't really say anything. But if I say I reduced the time to complete that task by, you know, an hour or 2 hours, that's going to give specifics. So when you're preparing for answers, you're just thinking about all those things while you're doing the preparation.
Okay, so the next question, could you answer by saying you don't feel comfortable answering that question? Regarding those illegal questions that were mentioned earlier, yes, you can definitely, you can answer the employer that way. Maybe you just feel that it does not pertain to the position. Or you can say, as Jenny Johnson just mentioned, you prefer not to answer that question. I'd like to say about that, if nothing comes to mind, I think sometimes it's a good idea to bring in a journal or some kind of notebook. That way you can kind of write down any notes to take while you're in the interview. And maybe writing it out could help you answer some of those questions, or at least jog your memory a little bit.
Another example might be if you took notes and nothing came to mind during the interview, well, on your follow-up communication, you know, I'm sure after the interview and you're reviewing your notes and reviewing the time that you spent during the interview, you can include something that comes to mind after the interview in your follow-up communication. So that's always good.
And yes, you should always ask permission to write notes. Let them know during the interview that you would like to take notes, and explain to them you want to take notes for the purpose of being able to articulate, again, how you best meet the job description and the qualifications of the job. So you should always ask permission to write notes during an interview.
Well, thank you so much, David, Delisa, Diego, and Velta, for this wonderful session, this super interactive session. I loved it. It was great. Does anybody else have any questions? We're already a little bit over, like 2 minutes over, but does anybody else have any additional questions? Otherwise, we will be signing off.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you, participants, for joining the webinar today, Effective Employment Interviewing.
Who is that?
Oh, that was Delta.
Oh,
I came back on. I unmuted.
okay. Well, thank you so much. I loved it. Y'all always provide such interactive sessions with questions and activities.
Thank you. That's very good feedback. We
Great.
appreciate
Mhm.
that, and we're continuing to grow and learn.
Practice.